it's Jan Beta, and today's subject is going to be the Amiga 1200. More specifically, I'm going to fix some flaws that I made last time I worked on the circuit board. And secondly, I want to put a whole new keyboard in it, which is the more important part of this video, as you are going to see. So let's go! And as you can see, I'm using the power supply I made in one of the previous videos. And yeah, I'm going to do a whole more conclusive video about this power supply in a bit. I'm working on that already. So yeah, today's subject is the Amiga 1200. This is my original Amiga 1200, or rather the one that my sister used back in the day. And then I used it ever since, basically. So she held onto it, thankfully, and gave it to me. And this is now mine. I put it in one of the A1200.net clear cases because I like these cases. And I also ordered a new set of keycaps from A1200.net via their Indiegogo campaign. And as you probably know, if you're following this stuff, production got delayed a lot by the pandemic that's currently happening, and they still didn't come through with the keycap production. So I'm still waiting for the replacement keycaps for this original keyboard. But today I'm going to show you another solution that I'm going to at least use in the meantime while waiting for the new keycaps, because it's a very neat solution actually. But first of all, I want to crack this open, because I have to open this anyway, and show you some of the hilarious things I did. In retrospect, they are pretty hilarious, because I learned a lot since I last worked on the circuit board of this thing. So let's open it up, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about and then fix the things that I don't like. Some eons ago, I did a full recapping of the Amiga 1200 board, and it was actually the first time I ever worked with SMD surface mount components. And yeah, I did some screw ups, and it's a bit embarrassing, but I'm still going to show you what I did again after all these years. And I certainly learned a lot and improved on my skills and my tools. And I would never do this like I did back in the day when I did this again. So yeah, let me just briefly open this up, and then I'm going to talk about the things I would do differently today, and I'm going to fix some of the things I did badly back in the day. This is relatively easy to open. There's just, oh, I should disconnect everything. I still like these new cases that they made, and they also have proper brass inserts for the screws and things like that, so that's way better than the original cases, which are, most of them are pretty yellow at this point, and some of them are really brittle, and the screw inserts prevent you from potentially destroying these when you open them. So now this should come apart. Okay, there we go. I am going to put my ESD wrist strap on, and I'm going to remove the keyboard. And these connections for the LED assembly. So now we have the top part of the case freed. There's quite some stuff in there, and a bit of dust actually. To get the ribbon out of the keyboard connector, you just lift the bezel on top there carefully, and it unlocks the flat flex. Then we can take out the whole keyboard. So then you can probably already see some of the oopsies I made back in the day when I recapped this. First of all, I used ceramic capacitors to replace the original electrolytic SMD capacitors. As you can see here, these are multi-layer ceramic capacitors with the same values that the original electrolytic capacitors have. But these ceramic capacitors have some different characteristics. So in some cases, they won't work as well as the electrolytic capacitors. Nowadays, I would always use same for same, so replacing the electrolytic capacitors that were originally on here. I would never use ceramic capacitors anymore, and I did some Amiga 600 work where I used electrolytic capacitors, and I also did another Amiga 1200 where I used electrolytic capacitors. The modern SMD capacitors are way more reliable than the old ones that were on here. These were like early 90s electrolytic SMD capacitors are basically all very unreliable. They were kind of not having the production process down completely, so they are all leaking, or most of them I've seen are leaking and destroying the circuit board underneath with the electrolyte that they literally leak out of their cases. It's a good idea to use modern electrolytic capacitors to replace the original ones and not use ceramic caps. That said, I didn't run into any problems whatsoever with the ceramic capacitors yet. I have a Blizzard 1230 68030 accelerator card in here that I've used for ages without any issues with these ceramic capacitors. Some accelerator cards have issues because the timings can be slightly different with the ceramic capacitors. So I would recommend not using ceramic capacitors, even though I did in this build and didn't have any issues with that. So yeah, that out of the way, I clearly did something which is the most obvious thing. One of the most obvious things is that I just used this little poly bag, plastic PE, it even says PE bag, to insulate my compact flash card reader or compact flash reader writer adapter. This basically replaces the original hard disk that was in here. And I used this poly bag, which clearly isn't the best choice considering things like electrostatical discharge and things like that. I'm probably going to come up with a better solution and just put some insulation on here, like electrical tape or something, which should be more than enough to insulate this against the rest of the circuit, which was the purpose of this thing. There's also angled adapters for these, so these just are kept floating above everything else. Could also put a rubber foot on here or something. I'm just going to figure that out as I go. The other thing that is super obvious, yeah, these things here. These are just electrolytic capacitors, just regular electrolytic, good brand Panasonic capacitors that I put in here instead of the ones that were in here originally. And yeah, as you can see, I didn't have low profile ones that you need for this job at the point when I did the recapping of this. So I just used bigger ones, which are rated higher voltages and things like that. So they are electrically, they are probably super good and even better than the original ones, but they don't fit the case. So I had to leave the leads a bit longer protruding out here and just bend them at all kinds of angles, which looks super messy. And I put some electrical tape on there to insulate them against the rest of the circuit, but that's clearly, yeah. I considered not showing this to you, but I did now. I apologize for this mess. Electrically, it worked absolutely no problems whatsoever for a long time like this, ever since I did the recapping. But I'm going to put some proper low profile caps in here today before I do any further work. So let's take the circuit board out of the case completely and do that as the first step. Speaking of flaws, I also seem to have lost some of these cheapo rubber feet that they put on there for the new case. I am just going to put some proper ones on there. In the process, yeah, we're going to have to remove the disk drive and the expansions from this, I guess, before I can properly work on the circuit board. So I'm just going to do that. Starting with my CF adapter. This is an IndiVision AGA by Individual Computers, which is kind of like a graphics card for your Amiga that allows you to have the output coming through DVI, actually, the graphics output. So you have a very crisp output digital picture. This also allows for VGA output, but I've only ever used the DVI digital output through an HDMI adapter and hooked it up to a modern monitor, and my capturing card clips onto the graphics chip here. I'm just going to remove that as well. So to remove the circuit board, there's one screw that's actually screwed in from the bottom side through the case and the shielding, and there's a couple of screws around the perimeter that are screwed into the casing here. And we also have to remove all the screws on the connectors in the back, I think, to get the bottom shielding off. Super fun operation. The accelerator card has to come away from the circuit board at least. Only ever really comes out the bottom. Okay, now our circuit board has come loose. And now for all these screws on the connectors here. I actually have a proper tool for that, but I'm always, or most of the times, I'm too lazy to use it. This comes from my iFixit screwdriver set. Here's the circuit board in all its inglorious glory. So yeah, I want to replace these. So I have these packs. I'm going to link the capacitors I used in the video description. We need two 1000 microfarad ones and two 470 microfarad ones. If you're only interested in the keyboard, you should skip forward in this video. I always make like chapters. You can just click on the chapter where I start talking about the keyboard. That's probably a good idea if you're not interested in me fixing my oopsies from ages ago. Yeah, I'm just going to stop talking and actually do some work. Time lapse. I now have the new proper size capacitors, like low profile capacitors in place. There's two 470 25 volt rated ones. These are the bigger ones from this perspective, and two 1000 microfarad 10 volt ones that I put in here. Yeah, and I also cleaned up the board again a bit with Q-tips and alcohol, and looks better than ever before, I guess. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly give this a test run in case I did something horribly wrong, which I hope I didn't, but let's see. Okay, let's try to power this on using my homemade power supply again, and this should start up with the kickstart screen, I think. After it finishes looking for the hard disk drive, which isn't installed anymore. There we go. Okay. That's our 3.00 ROM in there still, the original ROM this came with. So yeah, this seems to still work. I'm just going to leave it on for a bit to see if the capacitors get hot or anything, in case I reverse the polarity on one, but I don't think so. So I'm now going to put it all back together, or at least the bottom part of the casing. because the next step is going to be the new keyboard. And as for this CF card adapter, I'm just going to wrap a couple of layers of electrical tape around that. That should probably do, and I can still access the CF card should that be necessary. This botch wire here is a fix for the drive LED, hard disk LED not working correctly. Yeah, it should be absolutely fine for the plastic to hit this. Okay, let's see if this still works. It should now boot from the CF card after turning it on, if that's correctly connected. Yep, and there we go. Okay, it does still fully work. Okay, now for the main attraction of this video. So this is today's main attraction. This beautiful replacement Amiga 1200 keyboard designed by Sergius. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that correctly. Sorry if I'm butchering your name here. But super nice work. This is basically a new Amiga 1200 keyboard made completely from scratch. It uses Keil blue tactile mechanical switches for each key. It is US layout, unfortunately, because I'm used to using the German layout, of course. But it uses standard keycaps that you can replace. These are actually XDA profile keycaps, so you can just get a new set of keycaps for these and replace the ones this came with. This comes in two different color options. I think a couple of color options, even if you count colored function keys and special keys. I went with the black version for my clear case here because I always strive to make this look a bit like the translucent Apple models. I really like those keyboards. Remember I think the Power Mac keyboards, which had dark translucent keys and the translucent keyboard case. I really like that look, and I'm kind of aiming for getting close to that look with the clear case and this black keyboard. Yeah, let's have a closer look at this. So this actually is a 2 PCB construction. These are 2 PCBs stacked on top of each other. This is the bottom part, and as you can see, the switch mechanisms are protruding here. The switches are soldered on the top PCB actually, and yeah, you can see the mechanical switches shining through here, the blue ones, screwed together with these nice golden screws. It seems a pretty solid construction. I mean, one circuit board already is pretty rigid, but this double layer circuit board construction, super rigid. Actually, yeah. And there are metal retainers, just as you would have on the original keyboard underneath these larger keys, so they have some nice feedback. And I have to say, it really feels way better than the original keyboard, obviously, because the original was pretty cheaply made. Just a membrane keyboard, and that membrane is also prone to failure. They wear out. You can get new membranes, of course, but this is an alternative, I would say, and a rather nice one at that. This flat flex ribbon cable is just soldered onto the board that has the actual keys connected to it, obviously. So the keyboard matrix, this is just a simple keyboard matrix actually that's different from the keyboards from the Amiga 2000 and the 500 and the 4000 and probably the 3000 as well, which have like a keyboard controller chip in the keyboard or in the keyboard assembly. And this Amiga 1200 and the 600 only have like a matrix, and then the whole operation is done on board, on the main board of the computer actually. So this is relatively easy to make, I guess, but it's very well executed. This also has some nice features, like a caps lock key that has an LED in it, I think. And you can also wire this up in different ways to have a second control key, which is located here. That's pretty nice. There's two blank keys that Sergius added, and of course, obviously, you can just replace all the keycaps with something you like better, maybe, or your specific keyboard layout. Can't help typing on this all the time. I'm sorry. In order to assemble the new keyboard, we actually need the backing plate from an original Amiga 1200 keyboard. So I am going to have to disassemble a keyboard I already have one in mind that I am going to show you in a second. These instructions are pretty conclusive. This is Sergiu's website that I'm referring to. And I'm obviously going to link that in the video description. You can also order the keyboards from there. And they're not that expensive given the fact that they are a small-scale project and given the fact that the parts used are already relatively expensive. Two circuit boards and the keyboard switches and things like that. So the pricing is super reasonable, I think. Still less expensive than buying a tested Amiga 1200 keyboard on eBay, for example, these days, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the way things are these days. So what I'm going to do is to get out my Amiga 1200 keyboard that I want to disassemble, and you are going to see why I chose this one. So here's the chosen one. And spoiler alert, it's actually from another Amiga 1200, or at least parts of an Amiga 1200 that was located and stored in the flooded basement. I already did some videos about refurbishing machines that were in that same basement, and I actually got another A1200, at least partially. There's the bottom half and the keyboard are still existent. It's missing the top half of the case altogether. And as you can see, this keyboard is in a really, really poor state. I would have to take this apart fully anyway to clean it and to see if the membrane is still all right and things like that, which I doubt because there's some added like tape here on this connector and things like that. So it's a bit shady. I guess the keyboard is probably not in the best condition from the inside. The outside is out of the question. It's absolutely filthy. So I'm going to put on some gloves and disassemble this and take the metal backing plate from this to put the new keyboard in and put it in my Amiga, actually. So got my gloves on. I'm just going to put the Amiga aside for a second. Yeah, unscrewing a million screws again. Got all the screws out and lifting this. This membrane actually feeds through the metal part, so carefully getting this out. Doesn't look that bad from the inside, actually. The membrane looks intact. But this is going to be a separate video at some point, so I'm going to put that aside. And obviously, there's quite some filth on here. I'm going to give this a good scrub down before we continue. So I cleaned it in the sink and used some of the more aggressive cleaning fluids that I have in my kitchen. And I'm also going to give it another wipe down with isopropanol, just to make sure that all the germs are gone. Yeah, that should probably do. Let's try and put the keyboard in there. And as you can see, this fits the bezel here perfectly. So what we're going to have to do is to remove two screws, this screw and this screw here. These are going to be used to mount this in this assembly. And yeah, they're just flathead screws with nice nuts on the backside. So we're going to remove these and put them through this assembly here, and then we are going to be ready to use this, I guess. Oh, and I actually need a smaller screwdriver. These are really small flatheads, but these are like golden. I guess it's, part of it is the looks, part of the whole experience. So that's pretty nice. I mean, it's a nice looking keyboard. Yeah, these are not screwed in very tightly. I can just hold the nut with my finger from the other side without any issues. And we're going to have to feed this ribbon cable through the opening here, just like with the original keyboard. And now this sits in here very nicely, and the holes line up with some of the holes that the keyboard was mounted in previously. So we're going to screw it down in these positions with the nuts. Yeah, that should be enough to just hold the nut from the other side. Don't want to screw this down too heavily because obviously our circuit board might break. And I think Sergiusz also mentioned that on his website, that you don't want to use too much force. And there you have it. That's now ready to go into my Amiga. And obviously this should fit perfectly in here because it just uses the original bezel that slides in here. For some Amigas you are going to have to make some adjustments and things like that, but yeah, this is pretty sturdy. We're going to put the flat flex ribbon cable in the keyboard connector, and you actually want to leave the locking mechanism open, obviously, for this. And then you just put it in there, and you should be able to fully insert it without much, yeah, there we go, without much force, and then push down. I think this is only very slightly thicker than the original membrane connector. This is a very thin flat flex, so you want to be careful with this as well. Yeah, but this feels awesome. It's super sturdy in there. Should have fed this cable through here before, probably. That's the same with the original keyboards, obviously. So this should go on here. Yeah, there you have it. That's in here quite nicely. That looks super awesome. Very good looking keyboard. I think it matches my clear case pretty nicely, as I anticipated. Yeah, and it's actually, I think it's protruding a tiny bit less than the original keyboard, but looks super professional, and as you can see, it fits perfectly. So yeah, we're going to have to put some screws back to hold this together and then see if it actually works. Ah, but I love this. This feels so much better than the original keyboard, and you can hear the clickiness of it. Clicky keys. I like these. If you don't like clicky keys, you can still get the red switches, which are non-tactile. These have a little bit of a point where they actually make a click, and you can feel that physically as well. So these are really nice switches, commonly used in gaming keyboards for modern PCs, of course. Lovely. Let's do some testing. No long-term experience, but I think these might be way easier to type on because they're at a better angle, especially the keys in the top rows. That's a nice thing, I think. And as I said, you can, of course, replace these keycaps with XDA keycaps of your choice. So I just pulled this blank keycap here, and as you can see, this is what you get. This is the actual switch that's soldered to the PCB there. And we can easily put the blank keycap that I used here back in. And actually this blank keycap is a thing that happened for US keyboard layout Commodore Amigas. They either had a larger return key here or a blank keycap. So they didn't have to run different keyboard designs. Especially the later ones have this blank keycap, I think. So they cut some cost there for different keyboards. Just used blank keys for some of the keyboard layouts that don't have a key in that position. Of course, this is fully wired up, so you can use another key map and just mark the keys differently or something like that. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to end up just using the US keyboard layout and change my settings on the Amiga accordingly. Because, yeah, usually I don't type that much. As I said, I'm really used to the German keyboard layout on the Amigas because I only ever had Amigas with German keyboard layout where the Z and the Y are in different spots, and there's also the umlauts Ä, Ö, Ü and SZ, which are the most German letters you can possibly think of. Yeah, but we have these here, so they are not present on this keyboard, but there's always workarounds for getting to those with some key combinations and things like that on the Amiga. Yeah, so I'm pretty chuffed with this. This is a pretty nice feeling keyboard. This is just, everything is better than on the original keyboard, basically. But of course, it lacks a bit of the nostalgia because it really feels like a modern keyboard because of the switches. Or you could maybe say this now feels like a good keyboard from back in the day because these modern tactile mechanical switches are all modeled after the Cherry switches, which have been around forever, basically. So the Cherry tactile switches were just used in really good PC keyboards, like IBM used them and things like that. But this is definitely a step forward in terms of usability, I would say. Types much nicer than the original mushy Amiga keyboards. This is now set to the German key map still. Obviously. Oh, there we are. It's in the input preferences and I can set it to American. And this should now be, yeah, this is the keyboard layout we have here. That's much more convenient. So yeah, I'm just going to save it like that. And I've now set my keyboard input to the American keyboard layout that we actually have here. Yep, that does work. Yeah, pretty nice. I am going to type some stuff on this and we're going to see. And there you have it. I think this is a super attractive option for replacing the keyboards in these A1200s. Obviously, it's not meant to give you a nostalgia feel. It's more meant to be used as a productive keyboard, kind of, as Tergius also points out on his website. This is like, yeah, it feels like absolutely like a modern keyboard because it is. And it's so much easier to type on than the original Amiga 1200 keyboard, which is kind of mushy and I don't know. It's like it's just a cheap keyboard assembly basically. So this is way better from a technical point of view. It is not the original keyboard, obviously. The keys don't look like the original keys, but they are pretty close, and you can also you can personalize this with other keycaps of your liking. Obviously, Sergiusz also offers different color schemes and things like that on the website. That is linked in the video description if you're interested in buying one of these, or maybe making your own design. I think there's a couple of other Amiga keyboard replacements out there, but I haven't seen any of those in person yet, so I can't really compare this to anything but the original Amiga keyboard. And I have to say, this is the better keyboard, but it doesn't scratch the nostalgia itch to that extent. Yeah, I think there's not much more I can say about this. This just works beautifully, and it feels beautifully, and it looks beautiful too. So yeah, I hope you found this video enjoyable, and thank you all for your support on Patreon and the channel memberships page here on YouTube. Thank you for subscribing, thank you for your thumbs up or down, thank you for your comments, and thanks for sticking around this long for this video. Hope to see you again on this channel sometime. I'm Jan Beta. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.